testing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, here we go. Let's do a little experiment here. Let's go to render something. And this time, no, not 3D landscapes. We'll do a shaggy star thingy. Let's just play with the numbers. Number 6 here, number 7, number whatever. Let's do some experimental things here. No idea what's going to come out here. Radius a little bit bigger. Woo, that's a way bigger. Okay, let's keep that. And we have sort of a gradient going through here, but I want a stronger gradient. And so what I'm going to do is, first of all, let's see, we need to select the outside selection. Actually, let's use the magic wand right here. Magic wand, click the outside, and then we can store this selection. There you go. And simply invert it. There. And replace it. So now we have the inside not selected, the outside selected. Oh wait, that's not what I wanted. Let's go invert it back and replace it, because I want to clear the inside here and clear it with a gradient of a different color. So I'm going to go to the gradient tool here, right click. You get a linear gradient tool, you have some circular gradients. Why not? Let's do something confusing. There's a choice of different gradients. Let's do something with green. Alright, so if we go something like that, we can do a green gradient. Maybe, let's see, let's give it something like that. Okay. And the whole point is that I want some zone that has green in it and then gradually fades away and fades away the other way, darker or brighter. And I want the whole thing now to be picked up as a custom brush. So I can simply go to use selected as brush and store that so we can have a quick look and manage that copy. There it is. So we have this brush and we can go back to the brush tool and enable the preview of the brush so we see it and we can paint on that. And what I'm going to do is simply stamp it in a couple of places. First of all, let's make it fully opaque. It is. So we have fully opaque stamps we can put there. In fact, I'm going to make the image a little bit bigger here. Let's go resample that. Let's make it about full HD 1920. There, even bigger than full HD, why not? Alright, and what I'd like to do is simply have a little bit of something here that shows a variety of colors. Some of them green, some of them not so green. I mean, the hue is green pretty much, but the brightness, the lightness is varying. And where I'm going with this, first of all, I'm going to also make this seamless. Let's make this seamless. And now let's store that image. Alright, so we've got the image, we've got the mask, we don't need that anymore. Let's just minimize it. We can minimize the brush. Don't need that really anymore either. And what I want to do is take this and transform it a little bit. Perhaps make it a little bit smaller. Scale it down and then tile it. And since it is seamless, we won't see where the seam is. The next thing I want to do now is, okay, let's store that. That's part of the workflow. Store often and even save often if you're not lazy like me. And God, I'm laughing. I'm the only one laughing at my jokes. That's sad. All right, let's focus on another transform filter here. Are the transforms there? This one, let's do the 3D perspective. Good old 3D perspective. Something like that. But I want to have that in a vertical way like this. Okay. Now this one is actually showing the seam again. So I might want to cancel that and show this as seamless. Once again, make seamless. And that's our current image. And in fact, I'm going to use this as an elevation map as much also as a color map. So I'm going to copy it to the swap image. Because right now, if I toggle here, swap image is empty. I can just place it right there and back to the main image. And you can see that they're both the same now. You can see here actually in the sidebar. If you open the sidebar, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger on the view. Where do we see the view of that? Options, jumbo, that's it. You'll see that there are two images identical on that same layer. And that's the main image, and next to that, the swap image. Let's make it a little bit smaller. There. All right, main and swap image. And the main image in the front, in the main image buffer, will be basically treated as an elevation map, like a grayscale. So we can actually make it grayscale, so we have a preview of what that might look like. Or if you want to control it, use the color lens, for instance, to control that grayscale value. And something like this. So this is our grayscale. You can get rid of the brush preview. We can store this image. So we have a grayscale image. Don't need this. We have a grayscale image for the elevation, and we have a color image for the texture and the coloration in the back in the swap image. All right, let's go there. And so what I'll do now is simply go back to, of course, the 3D render puppy ray. And what we will see is a whole lot of stuff that we don't want necessarily. I'm going to get rid of the water for this exercise. So let's go to value none. There's a little bit darkness here. I'm going to go enable the global illumination. There you go. Skylight, if you want to call it that. And so where I'm going with this is essentially, let's put the light a little bit different place. What I want to do is get to a point where I have something like this without that big bright sunny spot. Let's bring the sun far away. There. But a long perspective view is what I'm looking for. So let's extend the level for the depth for the fog and look a little bit up the sky. Something like this. Where I'm going with this is I want to have the scene in such a way that there is plenty of large green patches and then a gradual disappearing smaller green patches. And I want to make it so that I can paint over those and maybe plant some trees, but only where we have those green patches. Right? So there's basically a technique for that. I'm going to say, okay, well, that's good enough. What we need, that technique basically amounts to using what we've seen in some other tutorials, using not the grids, not the info, in the grid section. Okay, if you go down to the bottom of the sidebar, you have a section called the Z scale guide. Right? When you enable that and you enable the preview on your brush again, then the brush that you have here will change depending on what's in the background. Now, what's in the background right now, let's go have a look. It's this swap image. That's not what we want anymore. We want the same as what's in that perspective rendered view. So let's do that. Let's get a copy of it. Let's store it. Let's switch to the swap image. Let's put that one in there and then switch back. You won't see a difference, right? Just look up here. You're now looking at the main image. Whereas if you had not switched on the S for swap, you would still be looking at the swap image. Okay, let's go back. There it is, main image. All right, so now you can see that it is kind of more correlated to the coloration, but not exactly yet. It's really the brightness that's dictating. When you go over when your cursor goes over a bright spot, the brush that you have is getting big. And when it's a dark spot, it's getting small. There you see it disappear. There in the shade, it's disappearing. And the moment you go over the bright spots, it's changing to a bigger size. What I want is not have the brightness control that. I want the color to control that. So that wherever it's very saturated green, I want it to show me that size. All right, so what I'm going to do is first of all switch to the swap image and actually change the saturation and the brightness a little bit. That way it will be more affected by the presence of those green patches. All right, so let's see if I go to adjust hue saturation value. Right. Saturation, a bit more green saturation, and a bit more blue or brightness rather. You can change the hue if you want. Right. Sometimes that helps because we're not going to use it now to show that color. We're going to use it to select something of particular interest. So forget what it looks like. Focus on whether it helps you select it. Right? And we can do that with the same. And we can do that, for instance, several times. We can go back into the same filter. Where was it? Adjust hue saturation value and do even more of that mysterious saturation thing. And most importantly, now that we have identified some parts that are green, perhaps even more so with additional adjustments here on color, reduce the, go to additive and then subtract blue and red. And so you are essentially looking at green or nothing. You can, depending on how you adjust this, you'll see some areas that are completely black, and those are the ones that really didn't have much green in the first place. You can also go into perhaps adjust the image dynamic range a little bit, a bit more on the green here. Of course, you don't want the green in the sky, so that will have to go away. That used to be light blue, which is a light, cyan. That's a mix of green and blue. So we're going to need to erase that. We can just use the fill color here, the fill rectangle. And let's see, it's it's black, so we'll erase here, something like this. And we can also blur it a little bit, perhaps adjust the contrast first. So let's go to, what, that's great, is the curves. And with the curves, we can adjust the contrast a little bit here. Say hold it darker for a while and then increase it to brighter, something like this. But again, keep in mind we want to have it gradually fade away in distance too. Even though it is green here, we want that to gradually fade to a lesser green so that when we use it as a control of the size here with the Z scale, it will make it smaller even though it is there. So it will control, we will do two things. We'll control the size of it, and we will also use it as a mask to allow or disallow even painting it in the first place, no matter what the size is. Right? So at this time, what I could do is perhaps adjust the contrast a little bit more, or blur it, or do a few more little gizmos here. Let's do a little bit of Gaussian blur, just a little bit, and then who knows, maybe adjust one more time for the value or the contrast, something like that. Right. All right, so that's going to be the selection mask. I'm going to go store that just so I have it, and I might want to actually select based on that green. So go to selection, select by color keys, there you go, and just select the green here. So anything that's greenish will be selected, and that mask you can select, you can choose to store. So you now have the alpha channel here that represents your green selections. And we still need to also have it less green in the distance and more green up front. So what you could do now is perhaps run another gradient on this that will be a linear gradient going across in a multiply mode so that it's gradually getting darker and darker. For that, you need to choose a gradient that is going from black to white, let's say this one. And then simply set the mode to multiply. Bum, 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 there it is. So now it's going from black to white, so the beginning part is going to be dark, which is really what we want at the very top here, and then multiply by white, which will keep it green. So we'll go something like this. Right? So that way you see that there is still some green action here, but it is darker. It is a darker green. It is less green, less intense than the ones up here. We can also blur the selection mask a little bit. We can grow it outside. Let's see, grow the selection, make it a little bit bigger. We can blur it, selection box filter. You can show the alpha here as a black and white gray. So that way you have a mask that will allow whatever you're painting, whatever your brush is going to hold is going to be allowed in, but it's going to be confined mostly in these areas. All right, so that's going to be for controlling the object, its position, its appearance, and the size at the same time. So we're going to keep the Z scale. We're going to enable the brush with the preview. Let's make sure we click the preview. So now you see as you go with this thing over the big green patch, it's making it big. It is too big. Yeah, we do need that to be smaller. We'll do that next time. But the whole point, my friend, is that we can go and now choose a different brush. Maybe we have some brushes that show a tree or some grass, some weeds, already rendered. There, something like this, prickly stuff. Right? Now this brush might need to be a little bit bigger, so let's go resample it. Let's make it twice as big. So now we have a brush that up here gets to be pretty big, but it's only appearing if the mask allows it. Let's go back to the main image. There we see the correlation now. You see how we have a selection mask that prevents it from even showing up. But if we are outside here, the brush is very small, and even if we did paint it, it wouldn't actually appear because, well, the mask is preventing it. But if we go here, not only do we see its size change, right? You see here it's very small, but it's not painting yet, and then gradually it's allowing it. So what you can do is simply paint from the back to the front, and if there's a gradient, it will not only, the mask will allow it, but the gradient will also size it. So if you have a gradient, like up here, you might have one where it's changing based on that distance. So you have some smaller ones here in the back, and then as you come closer, they get bigger, and then actually it gets smaller again when it's fading. So you gotta work on that a little bit to prevent the size from taking over, or the size from ignoring where it's allowed. Maybe you can do that simply with the size alone, right? Sometimes what you'll do is you clear the selection mask, and all you do is you have the brush here, and you paint it, and you allow it, but it's only going to have a size that's recognizable, like a non-zero size, if you are over those bright spots. Right, so now you're painting apparently on that part and nothing but that part. See here, there's probably a little bit room. There's a little bit room here. Yeah, they're still getting too big. We need to change the size of our mask in the back so that they're not getting that big in the back. That's just a little fine-tuning. But that's basically the idea. What I wanted to show you is you can have sort of a correlated mask that allows some of your painting to go in there without going out of control, and then basically make it look like it's correlated to the scene in which you're actually painting. And then another thing you can do to make it even more correlated is to add a little bit of drop shadow to it. Right now you can do that as part of the brushing action the moment you do that, or you can bake it into the brush itself. So the first technique is to say, let's go to the brush settings and enable the FX tab, the special effects, and there is a shadow. So you can enable that, and as you draw, if you stamp just one, draw a few, the moment you let go, you'll see they all get the drop shadow. That's good in many cases, but not in all cases. It may not be quite enough. And so another technique is you actually work and look at the brush itself. Right? So the brush image can be receiving a drop shadow. Wherever it is, I keep forgetting. There it is, add a drop shadow. Right? So you see the image in the brush. You can add some fuzziness to it. There you go, and do that. So now you have a version of the brush that you may want to store again. Because from here you can also add, change the size of it, make different hue, different versions of it, and now you have one that carries, and you don't need the post effects anymore here. It has its own brush, its own shadow baked into the brush image. And that may look a little bit better because then the smaller ones in the back immediately add the shadow, and then the bigger ones will add the shadow on top of there, and they sort of integrate better that way. All right, so that's some of the techniques to create some pretty massive paintings without going into too much detail, and it's just plaster away here. And of course, you could add more randomness to it. That really adds, by the way, if you do add some randomness to it, you will see, for instance, the random hue. Go right here in the brush settings under the main tab. You see a group of scaling options, like speed scaling. So if you draw slowly, it might make them smaller. If you go fast, it might make them bigger or smaller, depending on which way you apply this. I'm going to leave this one alone for now, but that's certainly another one that's also worth considering. And the random position. You don't need it exactly where you're going with the mouse. You might want to have a bit of randomness to that. There's also random size. That's a big one too, because not every tuft of grass is going to grow the same way, right? They do look a little bit different. Random angle, I wouldn't give too much there, just a little bit maybe, so that the wind can have its way and fun with those. But the random hue, definitely, right? You can have them look very different. Now maybe that's a little bit too rich, but you get the idea. You can change the hue randomly so that it looks a bit more like a collection of many different bushes, or same bush family, but different age, different level of dryness. There's a brightness you can also randomly change. So some of them look darker, some of them look brighter. There's the bleed. That's kind of to fade away as if it's drying off of your brush. And no, that's a dry out. Okay, so anyway, there's plenty of explorations to be had, and hopefully you'll see how with that you can create a composition pretty quickly where there's just a big variety of grass showing just only where you want it, right? And you don't want to be too picky and predict exactly where it's gonna go. You want to leave it a little bit to chance, but you just want to be done really quickly with it, because we've got other stuff to do, right? Okay. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.